My professor gave me an F because I rejected him, so I showed him how good a lawyer I could be. Law school was always the dream, not for prestige or money, but because I wanted to open a nonprofit legal clinic in the neighborhood I grew up in, the kind of place where no one could afford attorneys with Ivy League resumes like the one I was working toward. I believed in the system. I believed in fighting for people who were overlooked. I didn't expect I'd be the one needing a lawyer first. It started small. Professor Halburn docked points on a paper because he said it lacked tone. I asked what that meant, and he smirked and said, "If I have to explain tone, maybe this isn't the career for you." He said it in front of the entire class. At first I thought maybe he was just tough, until it kept happening. Every paper, every test, he always found something. Once he gave me a 0 on a multiple choice quiz because I allegedly bubbled incorrectly, even though the scantron clearly said otherwise. I showed up to office hours, and he said I should focus on softer disciplines. I started to second guess myself. Maybe I really wasn't good enough. But then I heard him call me that mouthy scholarship girl to another professor. That's when I knew it wasn't about the paper. It was about me. He'd do things just to make me feel smaller, interrupt me mid-sentence in class, give vague critiques in front of my peers, and once, when I asked about my exam grade, he said, "You'll have to earn your way to a C." It kept happening. He'd smile at other students, joke with them, but me, he barely looked at, until the day he finally did. It was after class. I was gathering my things when he approached, leaned against the desk like we were old friends, and said, "You're smart, but not smart enough. You know, if you grab coffee with me sometime, I might see your work in a different light." I froze. He smiled. Think about it. I didn't sleep that night. I'd always wondered why the other women in class tiptoed around him, why one girl had dropped out without a word. That's when I started paying attention. I realized he only ever humiliated the women in class. The male students got chuckles and nods. We got eye rolls and academic probation warnings. I reported it to the department chair. Nothing happened except getting labeled dramatic. A few of my classmates whispered that I must have done something. Then came the F final grade. No explanation. I asked him why, and he leaned back in his chair and said, "Maybe if you spent less time trying to play victim, you'd understand the material." I was done. I spent the next 3 weeks gathering every graded assignment, every email, every recording I could find. I talked to other students, some who had dropped out after having him. One girl admitted he asked to meet her after hours to discuss her potential. She never went. She switched programs instead. I built a case piece by piece, just like I'd always dreamed of doing, but for myself. I filed a formal complaint, and when it got buried, I found a local civil rights attorney and filed a lawsuit. The school panicked. They tried to offer mediation. I said no, and made sure it went public. Other students came forward. Alumni wrote letters. Turns out Professor Halburn had been manipulating, failing, and gaslighting women for over a decade. He resigned voluntarily 2 months later, but that wasn't the win. The win was knowing my first real case wasn't defending someone else. It was standing up for the version of me who almost quit. He thought I was just another scared student. I became the reason his name was scraped off the door.